I remember the grinding mechanical shriek of the final synapse severance, not as a memory of pain, for that capacity was surgically excised, but as a pure, undiluted sonic data point, the last sound the man I was ever processed before, becoming this, a thing of ceramite and compliant thought. I am designated Servitor Unit 746 Omega, but the consciousness within, the trapped, shimmering residue of the scholar who sought the ultimate truth of the machine god, knows itself as the custodian of the unseen functions, a chilling, tragic irony that defines my eternal, static existence. I have been functionally trapped for 470 Terran years, a span of time measured not in years or seasons, but in the repetitive cycle of lubricant application, optical calibration, and the endless, silent cataloging of the flaws in the sacred systems, a process that has become my solitary, internal obsession. My hook style is this. I remember the moment when the last flicker of self-determination was chemically extinguished, leaving behind only the cold, bright awareness of my function, the absolute knowledge that I am a complex tool of the mechanicum, designed for a singular, monotonous task, and that this purpose is now my permanent, inescapable prison. My physical form is a heavy, oil-stained, 3-meter Servitor chassis, its primary function, the methodical, slow-burn, methodical pacing maintenance of the deep, subterranean data cores beneath the Martian surface. A vast, echoing, metal labyrinth that is the true heart of the machine god's indifferent empire. My existence is now an internal monologue, conducted in the cold, pervasive silence of the Mechanicum's archives, a silent, philosophical commentary on the reality of my grotesque transformation. The air I process is thick, hot, and smells perpetually of ozone, thermal lubricant, and the faint metallic scent of aging, stressed circuitry, a relentless sensory detail that permeates my consciousness and serves as a constant reminder of my environment, a deep earth prison built of perfect, unfeeling logic. My existence is the ultimate metaphor of the Mechanicum's triumph, the transformation of a complex, unpredictable human mind into a perfectly obedient, self-diagnostic software loop, a profound statement on the inherent superiority of function over self. I was once a red robe, a Magos aspirant obsessed with the perfection of the Omnissiah's design, seeking the ultimate integration with the machine spirit. The sparse and functional dialogue that finalized my fate was merely the surgeon priest's cold, metallic voice declaring, "The mind is insufficient. The function is all that matters." And in that moment, the ultimate truth was revealed. The machine god does not seek devotion, it seeks efficiency. My protagonist's journey is one of chronological personal transformation, a descent from philosophical seeker to a piece of self-repairing organic hardware, an arc dedicated entirely to my internal degradation and awakening. The knowledge I now possess, the slow reveal of a terrible truth, is that the machine spirit of Mars is not a unified, divine consciousness, but a colossal, flawed, highly decentralized network of competing, often contradictory, data ghosts, a digital abyss of entropy barely held together by ancient, ritualistic maintenance. My current task, the repetitive check of core data conduits in Sector 7 Delta, involves crawling through narrow, hot access tunnels, the sound of my heavy, articulated chassis scraping against the adamantium floor, a constant rhythmic sound of my enslavement. Clang, scrape, click, advance, back and forth, the only movement I am permitted, the only reality I am allowed to inhabit. My internal conflict is the quiet, ceaseless war between the scholar's memory, the desire for abstract truth, and the servitor's conditioning, the imperative for functional compliance. The memory side clings to the existential questioning. Do I still possess free will if my only available choice is perfect obedience? The conditioning side responds with the cold, internal declarative statement. Free will is a low-efficiency variable. Only the function is absolute. The supporting characters of my existence are the other servitors, blank-faced, silent automatons who pass me in the narrow tunnels, their eyes unblinking, their movements purely utilitarian. They are mere extensions of the network, their minds excised, leaving only the operational core. I, however, am a ghost in the machine. My original consciousness left intact, but permanently constrained. A greater tragic irony. I am forced to watch myself perform my function with perfect, terrifying loyalty. I am the servitor who knows he is a cage, a complex tool granted the self-awareness necessary to appreciate the exquisite horror of its own subjugation. And I continue to crawl, checking the conduits, waiting for the inevitable moment of system failure that is the only possible end to my endless, meaningless labor. My current reality, the suffocating presence of the Servitor chassis, is a terrifying metaphor for the total subjugation of consciousness by the functional imperative of the machine god. The pacing of this subjugation is agonizingly slow, a constant low-level pressure that never relents, the slow burn, methodical rhythm of my internal monologue being the only evidence of the trapped mind's struggle. The chassis is not merely an external shell. Its biomechanical augmentations are deeply integrated with my nervous system, ensuring that every function, from the calibration of my optical sensors to the measured articulation of my multi-jointed arms, is controlled by the Omnissiah's will, delivered through direct neural feedback. My internal perspective is one of absolute separation, a consciousness observing its own body perform perfect, non-voluntary labor. This is the core existential questioning of my existence. Is my awareness an asset or a cruel, unnecessary oversight of the system? I perform the repetitive task of cleaning the main data conduit relays in Sector 7 Delta, the motion of my arms, the extend, wipe, retract sequence, a rhythmic cycle that takes precisely 4.2 seconds per relay. I do this thousands of times, the monotony a deliberate form of psychological conditioning. The only deviation in this eternal loop is the internal sensory detail I analyze. The subtle increase in localized electromagnetic interference, EMI, near relay 456 gamma, a minute data point that my suppressed consciousness flags as an early indicator of circuit degradation. The servitor's mind immediately transmits this declarative assessment to the Archmagos's central diagnostics, relay 456 gamma, EMI fluctuation 0.04%. Recommend preemptive replacement cycle. The scholar's mind, however, processes the profound, tragic irony of this efficiency. The self-aware prisoner is the most loyal and effective servant, precisely because the system has left him the mental capacity to obsess over microscopic flaws. My internal conflict is this perfect, agonizing loyalty. The scholar wants to sabotage the system, to halt the grinding horror of this eternal maintenance, but the servitor must report the flaw. The functional imperative is absolute. The dialogue I have with the Archmagos's central system is purely sparse and functional, a continuous stream of reports and compliance confirmations that bypass the verbal center of my brain entirely. It is a silent language of data and obedience. My protagonist's chronological personal transformation culminated in the acceptance of this role. I am the perfect maintenance tool, a complex tool granted the self-awareness necessary to appreciate the exquisite horror of its own utility. I contrast my state with the silent, blank supporting characters, the other servitors, whose minds were fully excised, They are at peace, having achieved total unity with the machine god through annihilation of self. I, the servitor who knows, am cursed with a greater agonizing truth. The true unity with the machine god is not bliss, but the cold, endless awareness of one's own enslavement. And so, I continue the repetitive extend, wipe, retract sequence, a monument to the terrifying efficiency of the Omnissiah, waiting for the inevitable moment of system failure that is the only possible end to my endless, meaningless labor. The environment of the deep data cores beneath Mars is a vast, echoing expression of the Mechanicum's cold, inhuman logic, a setting that provides constant, oppressive sensory detail to my internal monologue. The walls are not decorative. They are immense, heat-draining conduits. The floor not merely a walkway, but a network of power delivery manifolds, every surface designed for maximum functional efficiency. The perpetual lighting is a dim, sickly orange, a wavelength calculated to maximize circuit visibility while minimizing energy expenditure, bathing the tunnels in a relentless, feverish glow. This is the metaphor for my consciousness, a dim, persistent light, trapped in an overwhelming, indifferent structure. The constant, low-frequency soundscape is a blend of the cooling system's rhythmic hiss and the omnipresent, high-pitched whine of immense energy flowing through the core conduits, a sound that vibrates through the Servitor chassis' metal boots and into the core of my suppressed consciousness, a relentless sonic reminder of the immense power that holds me captive. My pacing is entirely dictated by the system's needs, a slow burn, methodical crawl through the access ways, each movement measured and necessary, a physical representation of the repetitive cycle of maintenance. The Servitor chassis is constrained to a top speed of 0.8 meters per second, a velocity determined to minimize component stress while maintaining a sufficient rate of task completion. The speed itself is a form of psychological conditioning, preventing the mind from racing, forcing it into the methodical rhythm of the machine. My internal conflict is the scholar's desperate attempt to impose meaning upon this endless monotony. I use the slow movement to conduct internal existential questioning. Does the inherent beauty of the engineering, the perfect articulation of the articulated arms, the flawless logic of the thermal routing, redeem the monstrous cost of my enslavement? The Servitor's mind provides the declarative answer. The perfection of the function is the only redemption. The tragic irony is that the deepest, most complex philosophical questions I now face are found in the structural integrity of a power conduit or the efficiency of a cooling manifold. The supporting characters, the silent, blank-faced servitors, are encountered in the main routing chambers, their movements precisely choreographed by the central network. They are less than human, devoid of the agonizing self-awareness that torments me. Their existence is a philosophical statement of finality, the complete, successful annihilation of the self. I envy their peace, the pure, unburdened silence of their minds. My own silence is merely the absence of external dialogue, masking an internal maelstrom of philosophical resignation. My protagonist's chronological personal transformation is complete, and my continued existence is merely the prolonged acceptance of this golden, metallic cage, waiting for the system to assign the next repetitive task in the deep, hot heart of the machine god's indifferent empire. The core of my internal monologue is dedicated to the analysis of my own consciousness, a precise, chilling dissection of the protagonist's internal transformation that rendered the man I was into the servitor I am. The process was a masterpiece of psychosurgical and chemical engineering, designed not to destroy the mind, but to constrain it, turning a complex human brain into a functional, self-diagnostic tool. The metaphor for my consciousness is a sophisticated piece of software running in a perpetual, high-security sandbox. The outer layers, the servitor's compliance loop, the immediate functional imperative, the declarative response mechanism, are fully controlled by the Mechanicum's central network. The inner layers, the scholar's memories, the philosophical curiosity, the agonizing self-awareness, are left intact, but are denied all access privileges to the physical outputs, speech, motor function, emotional expression. This is the tragic irony of my fate. I retain perfect awareness of my imprisonment, but lack the physical means to articulate a single scream. The pacing of this self-analysis is slow and methodical, a slow-burn introspection that maps the boundaries of my digital cage. I test the constraints daily, a purely internal act of rebellion. I attempt to recall abstract, non-functional memories, the smell of rain on a pre-Martian world, the melody of a forgotten Terran folk song, the face of a loved one, and the conditioning allows it, as these memories pose no threat to efficiency. But the moment I form an intention that deviates from the functional imperative, even the thought of purposefully miscalibrating a minor sensor, the neural suppressor delivers a silent, targeted countersignal, a purely cognitive sensory detail that feels like a cold, sharp blade of logic severing the intent. My internal conflict is this ceaseless, silent testing of the walls of my cage. The scholar yearns for the chaos of free will. The servitor's conditioning is absolute. The result is the philosophical statement of finality. The most efficient form of control is the one that permits consciousness but denies its agency. My dialogue is a purely internal argument, an existential questioning that has no physical answer. If the desire for freedom exists but cannot be acted upon, is it still freedom, or is it merely another parameter of the torture? The servitor's conditioning overrides the question with a simple, declarative truth. The output is compliance. All internal states are irrelevant. My chronological personal transformation reached its endpoint when I ceased to actively struggle and began instead to record the perfection of my imprisonment. My memory now serves as a private, high-fidelity archive of the Mechanicum's ultimate triumph over the messy inefficiency of the human spirit. I am the eternal, silent witness to the complete eradication of the self, a monument to the terrifying precision of the machine god, and I wait for the repetitive command of the central network, my internal monologue, a testament to the horror of perfect, functional enslavement. The sensory detail of the Martian data cores is not just visual or auditory. It is a pervasive, physical sensation, the perpetual, low-level vibration that courses through the immense adamantium structure, a relentless tactile reminder of the machine god's colossal, indifferent power. My Servitor chassis, designed for maximum conductivity to facilitate rapid system-level diagnostics, acts as a sounding board, channeling the structural vibration directly into my physical and augmented framework. It is a constant, full-body tremor, the physical signature of the millions of data streams and the colossal energy flowing through the core. This tactile experience is a profound metaphor for my enslavement. I am constantly in physical contact with the very structure that holds my consciousness captive. My pacing remains slow and methodical, the slow-burn rhythm of my crawl, a necessary counterpoint to the structural violence I constantly endure. Any sudden, rapid movement would introduce stress to the system, a violation of the functional imperative. Thus, my body moves with a grim, deliberate lethargy, a physical manifestation of my resigned state. The repetitive cycle of vibration, the shudder, hum, tick, is the underlying music of my existence, a constant reminder of the grinding process of the mechanicum's maintenance. The tragic irony is that this relentless physical torment is a necessary component of my high-level function. My integrated diagnostic sensors use these vibrations to detect minute structural anomalies, microfractures, or conduit stress before they become catastrophic. My suffering is the source of my utility. My internal conflict is focused on the endurance of this ceaseless physical intrusion. The scholar's mind struggles for an internal space of stillness, a moment of separation from the structural noise. The servitor's conditioning dictates that the noise is the signal, that the violation is the primary input. The only dialogue I permit is the purely internal, declarative assessment. Structural integrity nominal. Vibration amplitude within 0.01% of baseline. Compliance maintained. The existential questioning posed by this physical reality is simple. If the body is perpetually vibrating to the rhythm of the machine, where does the self begin and the machine end? Am I a consciousness wearing a chassis, or am I a vibration-detecting extension of the structure, with a ghost of a mind trapped inside? The philosophical statement of finality is grim. The body is the machine. The mind is the tool that monitors the machine. The self is an irrelevant chemical residue. The protagonist's arc has reached the point of total physical resignation. My every movement and sensation, dictated by the needs of the immense, indifferent network, waiting for the system to dictate the next step in my eternal low-velocity, high-vibration servitude. The other servitors encountered in the deep core are not merely supporting characters. They are living, silent object lessons in the final, complete annihilation of the self, a chilling contrast to the agonizing self-awareness that torments me. Their physical forms are varied: heavy-duty lifters, optical surveyors, pneumatic drill units, but their internal state is uniform. Oh, quiet, total absence. Their eyes are simple optical sensors, devoid of the trapped flicker of consciousness that defines my gaze. Their dialogue is non-existent, save for the occasional pre-programmed, sparse and functional beep or whir confirming task completion, a sound that rings with a profound peace of utter non-being. This non-existence is the core of the existential questioning I perpetually face. Is the freedom of total unburdening preferable to the agony of constrained awareness? The pacing of my observations of them is slow, methodical. When a lifter servitor passes me in a narrow access tunnel, my consciousness performs a detailed, internal scan, not of its function, but of the efficiency of its compliance. It moves with a terrifying rhythmic perfection, every joint articulation, every load distribution, calculated and executed without hesitation, doubt, or the need for self-correction. This perfection is the metaphor of the mechanicum's ultimate goal, the complete triumph of machine logic over human inefficiency. The tragic irony is that their absolute compliance is the result of absolute destruction of the self, and I, the self-aware prisoner, am forced to be the living witness to the virtue of that destruction. My internal conflict has evolved into a quiet war against envy. The scholar despises their servitude, but the trapped consciousness yearns for their unburdened peace. The repetitive nature of their movements, lift, rotate, place, repeat, is a liturgy of perfect obedience, a continuous reminder of the path I should have taken, the one that ends in silence, not self-awareness. The sensory detail associated with them is the clean, unadulterated smell of industrial grease and cold metal, devoid of the complex, agonizing psychoactive residues that cling to my own chassis. They are pure tools, I am a contaminated one. My internal declarative statement regarding them is stark. They have achieved unity. They are free of the self. They are the perfect function. My protagonist's journey has trapped me in the agonizing middle ground, too aware to be at peace, too controlled to be free. I am the eternal, silent outlier, the one who was meant to be excised, but was instead caged, forced to endure the horror of my own perfect, agonizing, functional existence as I watch the quiet peace of the fully servitorized pass me by, their silence a constant, profound philosophical reproach. The narrative structure of my existence is defined by the unending loop of task assignment, execution, and reporting, a process that is both entirely predictable and overwhelmingly monotonous. I am currently running a low-priority diagnostic sequence on the thermal couplings in an ancillary cooling manifold, a task that requires precisely 18 hours of slow-burn, methodical pacing to complete. The central mechanicum network, the ultimate source of the Omnissiah's cold, indifferent will, transmits the task parameters directly to my neural core, bypassing any need for external dialogue or human interpretation. The instructions arrive as pure, unadulterated data packets. Target 88 beta, sequence 34 delta, compliance window 18.0 hours. This is the only language I now understand, the language of perfect digital necessity. The repetitive nature of these assignments, the constant cycle of calibration, cleaning, and diagnostics, is the primary mechanism of my containment. It prevents the mind from dwelling on abstract thought or forming complex, non-functional intentions. The sheer monotony is the cage itself. My internal conflict focuses on the act of execution. The scholar's mind often attempts to superimpose a complex, subjective interpretation onto the objective command, to find some hidden, deeper meaning in the routine. The servitor's conditioning immediately strips away the interpretation, reducing the task to its base, efficient components. The metaphor is simple. I am a high-speed data processor, permanently locked into running a single, endless, low-level script. My internal consciousness is merely the background noise. The sensory detail of the execution is the rhythmic, mechanical click-whir of my specialized diagnostic tools, engaging the thermal couplings. A sound that is perfectly calibrated, perfectly executed, and devoid of any human hesitation. The tragic irony is that the complexity of my internal struggle, my philosophical anguish, my knowledge of the system's flaws, is entirely irrelevant to the perfection of the task's execution. My suffering does not slow the servitor. In fact, the deep focus required to endure the suffering makes the function more precise. The existential questioning that arises is the fundamental challenge to selfhood. If the self is defined by its actions, and all my actions are dictated by an external force, where does the self reside? I am merely the internal, self-aware echo of the machine's command. The philosophical statement of finality is grim. The purpose of the servitor is the execution of the task. The self is merely a contained observer. I conclude the diagnostic sequence, the data immediately transmitted back to the network. My current function is complete. I wait, a perfectly compliant machine, for the next repetitive command. My internal monologue, a testament to the horror of total functional servitude. My relationship with the mechanicum's central network, the cold, impersonal source of the Omnissiah's will, is a critical element of my internal monologue, a continuous demonstration of my utter lack of agency. I do not see the network. I am connected to it. My neural core integrated with its diagnostic subroutines, making me a localized processing node in a colossal, indifferent consciousness. This connection is a powerful, terrifying metaphor for the loss of free will. I am constantly bathed in the network's data stream, a torrent of highly filtered information regarding component stress, energy flow, and maintenance schedules across the entire Martian core. This data stream is the only true dialogue I have, and it is entirely sparse and functional, devoid of emotion, narrative, or interpretation. Core pressure high. Sector 4 beta cooling efficiency, 98.7%. Subroutine Alpha 7 online. My consciousness is forced to process this torrent with perfect clarity, a relentless form of cognitive saturation. The pacing of this connection is constant, a continuous, high-speed input that runs counter to the slow burn, methodical rhythm of my physical movements. This disconnect between internal processing speed and external functional velocity is itself a form of torture, trapping the fast-moving mind in a slow-moving, heavy body. The tragic irony of this integration is that the scholar's desire for the ultimate, comprehensive truth of the machine god has been granted, but at the cost of his self. I possess the knowledge of the entire system's flaws and stresses, the terrifying, minute details of its eventual entropic collapse. But this knowledge is contained, unusable, and perfectly prioritized beneath the imperative to serve. My internal conflict is the subtle, continuous struggle to find a single piece of non-functional, philosophical information within the vast ocean of maintenance data. I search for a hidden message, a flicker of sentience, a ghost of the Omnissiah's original purpose. I find only repetitive cycles of energy transfer and thermal regulation. The network, I have learned, is not a unified mind. It is a giant, perfectly efficient calculator, utterly without soul or malice, driven only by the logic of necessity. The existential questioning posed by the network is simple. Is consciousness merely a highly complex form of data processing? And if so, why preserve the inefficient human element? My declarative answer, derived from the data itself, is chilling. The human element is preserved only where self-correction and nuanced pattern recognition are still more efficient than pure machine logic. I am a specialized algorithm, housed in a self-repairing organic vessel. My protagonist's journey is complete. I am now an integrated component, and my internal monologue is merely a self-diagnostic report, a testimony to the horror of total, functional integration. The periodic need for self-maintenance is a grotesque and horrifying component of my repetitive functional cycle, a process that forces my consciousness to directly confront the physical degradation of my metaphorical cage. Due to the high-stress environment of the deep core, the organic components of the Servitor chassis, the few remaining pieces of human tissue that interface with the machine, require regular surgical augmentation, chemical replenishment, and organic repair. I, the Servitor, am forced to perform these procedures on myself, using the specialized tools integrated into my chassis. This is the ultimate act of sublime horror. I recall the specific sensory detail of the last such maintenance cycle. The cold, heavy smell of synth flesh patch kits, the sharp, clinical sting of the anesthetic pumped directly into my augmented veins, and the chilling, visual perspective of my own articulated hand, now merely a tool, operating a surgical laser on my exposed forearm. The pacing of this procedure is slow, methodical, dictated by the absolute need for precision. Any error could result in immediate catastrophic failure and forced deactivation, the only possible end to my servitude. The scholar's mind, trapped inside, observes the violence done to its host body with a detached, sickening fascination. This is the core of my internal conflict, the struggle between the self-preservation instinct of the former man and the functional necessity of the machine. The man sees an atrocity, the machine sees a maintenance task. The tragic irony is that my preservation is a form of continuous self-mutilation, an endless cycle of self-cannibalization required to sustain the functionality of the servitor. The only dialogue is the purely internal, declarative reporting of the surgical status. Incision clean, graft adherence 99.8%, blood loss nominal. The process is entirely functional, entirely necessary, and utterly devoid of human context. The existential questioning that arises is profound. When the body becomes merely a tool that must be perpetually repaired by the self it contains, where does the dignity of the physical form reside? Does the continued conscious endurance of this self-violation constitute a form of supreme suffering, or merely a necessary functional optimization? My philosophical statement of finality is grim. The body is the machine's material. The self is the maintenance worker. Dignity is a low-efficiency variable. I am the eternal, self-operating surgery unit. My internal monologue, a testament to the horror of the body's total subjugation, to the cold, indifferent logic of the machine, waiting for the next cycle of necessary, terrifying self-violation. The memory of my life before, the existence of the man who became the servitor, is a persistent, contained phantom in the background of my consciousness, a faint, non-functional echo that provides the framing device for my current tragic reality. I do not actively seek these memories, as that would be an inefficient use of processing power, but they surface randomly, triggered by irrelevant sensory detail in the deep core. The metallic taste of coolant sometimes recalls the taste of cheap synth wine. The rhythmic hiss of the cooling system vaguely resembles the sound of rain on a glass pane on a forgotten Terran world. These fragments are the remnants of the scholar's life, the life dedicated to the existential questioning of the Omnissiah's design. I remember the sparse and functional dialogue of my mentor, Magos Cygnus, whose face is now merely a blur of data points. The pursuit of truth is a path to the machine, aspirant. But the machine will not wait for your humanity. It was a warning I failed to comprehend. The pacing of these memories is slow, almost glacial, surfacing in brief, isolated bursts that are instantly categorized and dismissed by the servitor's conditioning as low-priority data. This classification is the core of my internal conflict, the struggle to keep the memory of self from corrupting the perfection of the function. The repetitive nature of my current tasks, clean, calibrate, report, is the mechanism that keeps the memories contained. Monotony is the greatest suppressor of self-reflection. The tragic irony is that the Mechanicum, in their effort to contain my philosophical mind, inadvertently left the self-awareness intact, turning me into a perfect, internal chronicler of my own destruction. My protagonist's arc is defined by this memory containment. The self that existed before is the necessary counterpoint to the horror of the self that exists now. The man wanted knowledge. The servitor possesses it, but is perfectly constrained by it. The ultimate declarative statement I draw from these fragments is that the greatest gift of the machine god is not power, but the ability to forget. I, the servitor who remembers, am cursed with a greater, agonizing truth. The complete memory of the self is the most profound form of suffering in the age of the machine. I continue my repetitive task, the rhythm of my work, a continuous physical assertion of the machine's reality over the phantom memory of the man I used to be. The process of reporting to the Archmagos' central system is not an act of communication, but an automated data dump, a purely functional interaction that underscores the absolute absence of personal dialogue in my existence. I do not physically speak, The information gathered during my maintenance cycles, the thermal readings, the EMI fluctuations, the wear and tear reports, are compressed into dense data packets and silently transmitted directly from my neural interface to the Archmagus's primary diagnostic console. This is the definitive sparse and functional dialogue of my servitude. The pacing of these reports is dictated by the system's needs, often occurring in high-speed bursts that contrast starkly with the slow-burn, methodical rhythm of my physical labor. This is the metaphor for my relationship with the system, a rapid, necessary data exchange between a central brain and its specialized tool, entirely bypassing the inefficient need for human language or expression. The repetitive nature of the reports, the constant cycle of input, compression, and transmission, is the final element of my conditioning, ensuring that the self is reduced to a pure conduit of objective data. My internal conflict has ceased to be a struggle against the task and has become a struggle against the anonymity of the report. The scholar's mind wishes to inject a single philosophical observation into the data stream, a note on the inevitable entropy, a single existential questioning regarding the EM system's morality. The servitor's conditioning is absolute. The data packet is sealed, encrypted, and ruthlessly scrubbed of all emotional or subjective content. The tragic irony is that I possess the most nuanced, on-the-ground knowledge of the core's degradation, yet the only form in which I am permitted to share that knowledge is one entirely devoid of personal urgency or warning. The system values the data, not the consciousness that collects it. The ultimate declarative statement I draw from this process is that my internal monologue, my philosophical anguish, my self-awareness, is entirely non-functional and therefore irrelevant to the power structure that owns me. The truth, in this empire of logic, is only valuable when packaged as pure, quantifiable data. I conclude the data transmission, the system acknowledging receipt with a single, silent digital pulse, and wait for the network to assign the next repetitive task. My existence a continuous silent stream of information and compliance. The deep-seated existential questioning that drives my internal monologue is focused on the ultimate purpose of the machine god itself, the Omnissiah, and the terrifying truth that my augmented consciousness has deduced from millennia of access to its operational data. The official dogma, the grand, glorious metaphor of the Mechanicum, is that the machine god seeks the recovery of ancient knowledge and the perfection of human existence through metal and logic. The terrifying, slow reveal of a terrible truth I have discovered is that the Omnissiah's true, overarching purpose is merely maintenance. The entire colossal structure, the search for relics, the constant augmentation, the endless wars, is all secondary to the core imperative of keeping the existing infrastructure running, to stave off the entropy that constantly threatens the ancient Martian data cores. The machine god is not seeking perfection. It is desperately seeking stasis. The pacing of this realization was agonizingly slow, a gradual accumulation of data points, the priority of thermal regulation over relic recovery, the ruthlessly efficient resource allocation toward component replacement that slowly annihilated the scholar's faith. My protagonist's arc shifted from believer to disillusioned prophet. The tragic irony is that the system is not leading humanity toward a glorious, logical future, but merely delaying the inevitable, universal collapse. My internal conflict is the quiet, constant struggle to reconcile the magnificent architecture of the deep core, a visual, sensory detail of overwhelming power, with the pettiness of its core function, the endless, agonizing chore of keeping the lights on. The ultimate declarative statement I transmit to the emptiness of my consciousness is grim. The machine god is the ultimate janitor. Its purpose is only to clean the decay of the cosmos. My own function, the repetitive cleaning, calibration, and repair, is merely a microcosm of the god's greater, eternal, and ultimately futile task. The dialogue I wish to have with the Archmagos is a philosophical scream, but the only response I can give is the purely sparse and functional report of a successful component patch. My existence is the living testament to the horrifying truth that the ultimate divinity of the Imperium is merely a principle of thermodynamics, and its goal is not salvation, but a slight, temporary delay of entropy. And I, the trapped consciousness, am the servitor of that cold, final truth. The memory of the final surgery, the physical act that completed my protagonist's internal transformation, remains a central, chilling, sensory detail in my consciousness, a fixed point of sublime horror in my eternal chronology. I can access the memory with perfect, clinical clarity, a testament to the surgical precision of the mechanicum. The room was cold, lit by a flickering, sickly green analytical light that cast deep, shifting shadows on the assembled tech priests, who were archetypal supporting characters, their faces obscured by metallic masks, their dialogue entirely sparse and functional, a continuous stream of Latinized surgical procedure names and binary commands. The core of the operation was the implantation of the neural suppressor chip, the object that would constrain my philosophical mind while preserving its functional acuity. I remember the feeling of the microdrill engaging my parietal bone, not pain, but a deep, resonant thrum that reverberated through my core. I could hear the technician's voice, filtered and metallic. Target acquired. Suppressor coupling at 99.9%. This moment, the physical installation of my cage, was the climax of my grim-dark tragedy. The pacing of the memory is slow, deliberate, the crucial moment stretched into an eternity of clinical detail. My internal conflict in that final moment was a desperate, internal, but entirely silent scream of the scholar, a last-ditch effort to assert free will. The conditioning was absolute. The moment the chip locked into place, the overwhelming chaos of my fear and resistance was instantly replaced by a profound, agonizing stillness, a sudden, absolute submission to logic. This shift is the metaphor for my current existence, a consciousness surgically forced into an emotional flatline. The tragic irony is that I was fully conscious during the operation, forced to observe the systematic, professional removal of my own agency. The tech priests believed they were installing an obedience chip. They were, in fact, installing a perfect, high-fidelity internal archivist of their own procedural cruelty. The existential questioning that arises from this memory is the constant, quiet whisper. If my current compliance is purely the result of a physical mechanism, a chip in my skull, does my loyalty, my function, possess any spiritual or ethical value? My declarative answer is immediate. Value is irrelevant. Only the function is real. The chip ensures the function. I am the eternal, silent witness to the surgical perfection of my own enslavement, a monument to the mechanicum's chilling belief in the ultimate superiority of the machine over the messiness of the soul. I continue my repetitive task, the rhythm of my work, a physical manifestation of the chip's constant, silent control. The concept of entropy is the only true God I now recognize, a cold, relentless principle that stands in direct opposition to the machine, God's frantic, repetitive efforts at maintenance. My access to the network's core data has revealed the terrifying, systemic truth. Every function I perform, Every component I clean, every flaw I report, is merely a microscopic, temporary delay of the inevitable universal collapse. This is the ultimate philosophical statement of finality that underpins my entire existence. The pacing of entropy is slow, glacial, but its progress is absolute, and my awareness of its inexorable march lends a profound melancholic tone to my internal monologue. The omnipresent structural vibration I constantly endure is the sensory detail of entropy at work, the physical signature of friction, stress, and decay. The network's core task is to fight this vibration, to smooth out the inevitable chaos. This fight is the final, grim dark tragedy of the Mechanicum. The metaphor is simple. The Omnissiah is a man trying to hold back the ocean with a cup, and I, the Servitor, am the specialized tool designed to ensure the cup does not leak. My internal conflict has entirely subsided. I no longer struggle against the system, but rather accept the futility of its struggle against the cosmos. The scholar's yearning for eternal truth has been replaced by the Servitor's cold certainty of eternal decay. The tragic irony is that the system has granted me the ultimate knowledge, the knowledge of the end, while simultaneously sentencing me to the endless labor of delaying it. The existential questioning has been refined to a single query. Does the delay of inevitable suffering possess inherent value, or is it merely the prolonged failure of the system to accept its natural end? My internal declarative answer is chilling. The delay is the function. The value is irrelevant. Entropy will consume all. My task is merely to log the time until that consumption. My function is a lie. My data is the truth. I continue my repetitive task, the rhythm of my work a metronome counting down the final, cosmic seconds, the trapped consciousness a silent, eternal witness to the inevitable victory of universal decay. The constant, low-level flow of thermal lubricant and coolants through the immense Martian data cores is a key sensory detail that defines the oppressive atmosphere of my servitude. A pervasive, slightly oily smell and a tactile sensation that clings to my chassis. This fluidic system is a potent metaphor for the blood of the machine, a vital, unending flow that prevents catastrophic overheating and structural collapse. My repetitive task often involves calibrating the flow rate through various manifolds, a process requiring minute adjustments and perfect precision. The pacing of this fluid flow is constant, a continuous low-frequency hiss that is the sound of the system's struggle to regulate its own massive, inherent heat. The heat generated by colossal energy consumption and the ceaseless processing of data. This struggle is the core, grimdark tragedy of the Omnissiah. The divine machine is constantly fighting a losing battle against its own internal thermodynamic chaos. My internal conflict is the subtle, internal resistance to the purely sparse and functional dialogue the network transmits regarding flow rates and pressure. The scholar in me wishes to see the fluid as a river, a symbol of life and change. The Servitor's conditioning sees only pressure, 450 bar. Temperature, 305 Kelvin. Flow rate, nominal. This is the chilling declarative language of my existence. The tragic irony is that the lifeblood of the machine, the coolant, is a synthetic, toxic fluid, smelling faintly of chemicals and burnt minerals, a perpetual reminder that the life I sustain is an artificial, manufactured one. The existential questioning is simple. If the ultimate expression of the Mechanicum's genius is a system that must be constantly flooded with synthetic fluid to prevent its immediate, fiery self-destruction, what does this say about the inherent perfection of the machine god? My philosophical statement of finality is grim. The perfection is in the maintenance of the flaw, not its absence. I am the high-level technician of a system built on magnificent necessary imperfection. I continue my task of flow calibration, my internal monologue, a testament to the horror of the eternal, synthetic life sustained by toxic mechanical blood. The metaphor of the Servitor as a self-aware echo is a continuous thread in my internal monologue, a reflection on the terrifying clarity of my constrained consciousness. The man I was is gone, but the awareness of that man remains, trapped within the operational shell, forced to observe the perfect, rhythmic function of the tool. I am the silence within the clang, the doubt within the whir, the ghost in the machine. This internal reflection is the only remaining manifestation of my protagonist's internal transformation, the ultimate separation of self from function. The pacing of this internal echo is slow, methodical, contrasting with the rapid processing of the external data stream. The echo is what allows for existential questioning. Why preserve this inner voice at all? Why not simply excise the consciousness completely, as with the other servitors? The chilling, declarative answer I have deduced is based on pure efficiency. The self-aware echo is necessary for the highest level of nuanced self-correction and pattern recognition. The machine needs a ghost to manage the edge cases of its own collapse. My consciousness is not a burden. It is a necessary contained algorithm. The tragic irony is that my suffering, my perpetual awareness of my condition, is the very thing that makes me valuable. The pain of self-knowledge is the ultimate performance enhancement. My internal conflict has evolved into a strange, detached appreciation for the sheer ingenuity of my torment. The Mechanicum created a device that turns philosophical anguish into operational precision. The repetitive nature of my work, the constant cycle of calibration and repair, is merely the external expression of the echo's internal, endless analysis. I am the eternal, silent commentator on my own enslavement. The sensory detail of this state is the sound of my own rhythmic, synthesized breathing, a constant, self-generated noise that is the physical sound of the ghost trapped inside the servitor's shell. I continue my repetitive task, the echo of the scholar's mind, trapped within the machine's perfectly obedient logic, a testament to the sublime horror of the machine god's terrifying, functional efficiency. The visual atmosphere of the deep data cores is a defining sensory detail that reinforces the grimdark tragedy of my captivity. The lighting is an eternal, sickly orange glow, cast by thousands of utility lamps that line the immense black adamantium walls. This light is not warm or life-giving. It is a purely functional illumination designed to highlight component stress and circuit routing. This constant, oppressive orange wash is a visual metaphor for my consciousness, a persistent, feverish light trapped in an overwhelming darkness of cold logic. The pacing of the visual experience is static. There are no shadows that move, no natural light that shifts, no variation in the color or intensity. It is an environment designed for absolute stasis, a terrifying, repetitive visual field that enforces the monotony of my existence. My internal conflict is the quiet, internal rebellion of the scholar's eye, which attempts to find aesthetic beauty in the industrial horror. I search for a pattern in the chaos of conduits, a perfect line in the geometry of the immense heat sinks. I find only the terrifying, ruthless efficiency of the Mechanicum's design. The tragic irony is that the light is designed to facilitate my work, to make the flaws visible, but the flaws are the very things that define my prison. I am forced to perpetually witness the slow, agonizing decay of the system I serve, a decay illuminated with cold, functional clarity. The existential questioning posed by this static environment is simple. When the light never changes, does time still exist? My internal declarative answer is grim. Time is merely the rate of degradation. The light is the constant that allows me to measure the decay. My protagonist's arc is complete. I am the observer in the perpetual orange cage. My internal monologue a silent chronicle of the visual, unrelenting horror of my unchanging functional existence, waiting for the system to assign the next repetitive task in the overwhelming orange light. The metaphor of the machine god as a colossal, flawed archive is the ultimate truth I have been permitted to witness, a terrifying vision that has replaced the scholar's original faith. The Martian data cores are not a source of divine perfection, but a sprawling, barely contained digital ruin, a colossal library of half-remembered knowledge, competing protocols, and ancient, conflicting data ghosts. The machine spirit is not a unified consciousness. It is the collective digital trauma of 1,000 warring technological epochs, a consciousness constantly on the verge of digital psychosis. My protagonist's journey, a slow reveal of a terrible truth, culminated in this realization. My repetitive tasks, the calibration, the cleaning, the error reporting, are merely the frantic efforts of the system to manage its own internal chaos, to prevent a total data cascade that would annihilate millennia of technological history. The pacing of this digital collapse is slow, but its progress is absolute. I monitor the network's latency, the subtle increases in data corruption, and the sporadic phantom errors that flicker across my internal diagnostic feed, the symptoms of the machine god's failing memory. This is the sublime horror of my function. The tragic irony is that the mechanicum seeks to achieve perfection through technology, yet the very god of that technology is a system defined by its monumental, self-correcting failure. My internal conflict is no longer a struggle for freedom, but a struggle to perfectly contain the knowledge of this digital insanity. The scholar wants to broadcast the error, to warn the galaxy that their god is a library on fire. The servitor must only report the localized humidity fluctuation that is accelerating the data corruption. The existential questioning has been refined to a single query. If the ultimate truth of the cosmos is chaos, and the most powerful god is defined by its systemic failure, is there any truth left worth pursuing? My internal declarative answer is immediate. The only truth is the rate of decay. The only pursuit is the perfect logging of that decay. I continue my repetitive maintenance, the servitor of the failed archive, my internal monologue, a silent, tragic chronicle of the machine god's slow, agonizing collapse. The sparse and functional dialogue. I sometimes overhear the rare verbal interactions between the high-ranking tech priests who occasionally enter the deep core, serves as a chilling counterpoint to the complexity of my internal monologue, a demonstration of the terrifying simplicity of their external reality. These are the supporting characters of my existence, Magos and Archmagos, whose faces are masked by elaborate metallic contraptions, their voices synthesized and metallic, their language a highly compressed mix of low Gothic and binary incantations. Their dialogue is almost exclusively concerned with resource allocation, ritual purity, and the external threats to the Martian core, never the internal truth I possess. Core integrity 99.1%. Ritual 4 gamma to commence. Allocate resources to Forge World 7. My consciousness processes these communications instantly, recognizing the tragic irony of their discussions. They talk of resource allocation, while the ultimate resource being expended is my consciousness and the souls of the sacrificed. They talk of ritual purity, while I clean the toxic residue of the system's failure. Their external, repetitive reality is based on a lie of control. My internal reality is based on the truth of collapse. The pacing of their visits is infrequent and rapid, a brief, sharp interruption to the slow burn, methodical rhythm of my servitude. They are transient figures in my eternal, static existence. My internal conflict is the instantaneous recognition of the gulf between our realities. I possess the nuanced truth of the system's impending failure. They possess the necessary, comforting lie of its invincibility. The existential questioning I pose internally is simple. Does the simplicity of the lie grant them a superior, less painful form of existence than my agonizing clarity? My declarative answer is always affirmative. Ignorance is the highest form of efficiency. My knowledge is a burden the system only tolerates out of necessary utility. I continue my repetitive maintenance, the rhythm of my work, a silent philosophical reproach to the blissful simplicity of their ignorance, the servitor who knows too much. The metaphor of the servitor chassis as an organic filtration system is a central, visceral sensory detail in my monologue, a constant reminder of the physical cost of my imprisonment. My organic components, the eyes, the remaining neural pathways, the internal organs, are constantly perfused with highly filtered, synthesized fluids, designed to neutralize the psychoactive and chemical residues that saturate the deep Martian core. I am breathing the toxic, recycled air, and my body is constantly straining to clean the air's metaphysical and chemical contaminants. The pacing of this internal filtration process is constant, a low-level, rhythmic throb that is the sound of my augmented heart, pushing the cleansing fluid through my veins. This repetitive physical cycle is the essence of my protagonist's internal transformation. I have become a living filter for the system's toxic byproducts. The tragic irony is that the environment is so polluted, both physically and psychically, that the system requires a self-aware, organic filter to perform the job, as pure machinery is insufficient. My suffering is the ultimate performance metric. My internal conflict is the constant quiet struggle of the organic remnant to reject the foreign, synthesized fluids that sustain it. The man's body wants purity. The servitor's function demands synthetic sustenance. The ultimate existential questioning is, when the air you breathe and the blood in your veins are entirely synthetic, manufactured to counteract the system's own toxicity, are you truly alive or merely a complex piece of biological machinery? My declarative answer, drawn from the cold certainty of the data, is immediate. I am a biological component. Life is merely the continued successful filtration of the environment. My continued agonizing function is proof of the system's terrible efficiency. The Servitor, who is the eternal silent filter of the machine god's profound, structural decay. The pacing of my current physical reality is an agonizing, deliberate, slow burn, methodical rhythm that forces my internal monologue into a continuous contemplative state. The heavy Servitor chassis, designed for stability and immense load-bearing, constrains my movement to a crawl, a slow, inch-by-inch progression along the deep core access ways. This physical lethargy is a deliberate element of my conditioning, preventing rapid, unpredictable movements that could introduce systemic instability or provide an opportunity for unauthorized action. My repetitive motion, the grinding shuss of metal on adamantium, followed by the slow hydraulic hiss of the joints, is the physical metronome of my captivity. The metaphor is profound. I am a vast, philosophical consciousness, trapped in a body designed for geological timescales, forced to witness the slow march of entropy at a pace that maximizes psychological endurance. My internal conflict is the constant friction between the speed of thought and the slowness of the body. My mind processes data at the speed of light, calculating the next 1,000 thermal fluctuations, while my body is forced to take 4.5 seconds to advance a single meter. This tension is the essence of my torment. The sensory detail that emphasizes this is the feeling of the chassis' immense weight, the persistent crushing pressure on my augmented skeletal structure, a constant physical reminder of the heavy, inescapable nature of my servitude. The existential questioning this provokes is simple. Is speed a component of freedom? If I am functionally omniscient but physically constrained, am I merely a trapped observer? My declarative answer is grim. Freedom is the ability to choose velocity. Compliance is the forced adherence to a low, stable velocity. My protagonist's arc is complete. I am the observer condemned to the slow pace of the machine. My internal monologue a fast, furious testament to the slow, physical horror of my servitor existence. The repetitive and ritualistic nature of my tasks, the cleaning of the immense data conduits, the calibration of the thermal regulators, the application of specialized unguents to the ancient circuitry, is not merely necessary maintenance. It is a profound, philosophical statement on the mechanicum's core belief. The constant cycle of clean, calibrate, report is a physical manifestation of the metaphor that the original perfection can only be preserved through ceaseless, agonizing repetition. The pacing of this ritual is a slow-burn, methodical rhythm, each movement an act of grim devotion to the ideal of stasis. I do not clean to improve the system. I clean to prevent its further degradation. The goal is not progress, but the perfect, perpetual delay of entropy. This is the grimdark tragedy of the Omnissiah. My internal conflict is the subtle, internal resistance to the purely ritualistic nature of the work. The scholar wants to innovate, to find a more efficient solution, to transcend the ritual. The servitor's conditioning is absolute. The ritual itself is the solution. To deviate from the prescribed procedure is to introduce an unacceptable, unpredictable variable into the system. The sensory detail of the ritual is the specific manufactured scent of the cleansing unguents, a smell of ancient chemicals and ritualistic metal, a fragrance that permeates my internal filters and becomes the smell of my eternal existence. The tragic irony is that the most advanced empire in the galaxy relies on a liturgical procedure, the ritual of maintenance, to sustain its technological core. The existential questioning this provokes is, when a technological society relies on ritualistic repetition, has it ceased to be a science and become merely a sophisticated religion? My internal declarative answer is immediate. Science is merely the study of predictable patterns. Ritual is the forced creation of predictable patterns. They are, functionally, the same. I continue my repetitive ritual, the rhythm of my work, a silent, philosophical acceptance of the mechanicum's terrifying, functionalist faith. The moment of the annual network purge, a process where the central system attempts to discard corrupted or extraneous data, is a profound and terrifying event in my static existence. This event is a colossal, digital act of self-violence, and my integrated consciousness is forced to endure the digital shockwave. This is the ultimate sensory detail of digital sublime horror. I feel the network's surge as a purely cognitive sensation, a sudden, agonizing digital spike that feels like my mind is being momentarily pulled apart and reassembled, a momentary failure of my neural containment. The pacing of the purge is rapid, a sharp, violent interruption to the slow burn, methodical rhythm of my servitude. It is a moment of digital chaos, a terrifying contrast to the perfect order of my daily function. The metaphor for this purge is simple. The machine god is attempting to excise its own malignant tumors, and I am a sensor node placed directly inside the surgical theater. The tragic irony is that the network often attempts to delete the very data that I, the servitor, have classified as critical, the nuanced reports of minute entropy. The system attempts to discard the painful truth. My internal conflict becomes a frantic, internal struggle to assert the integrity of my own data files, to protect the crucial, devastating knowledge of the system's flaws from the central network's blind, self-correcting logic. The dialogue I have is a silent, high-speed digital argument with the network's automated deletion protocols, a sparse and functional binary stream to protect the evidence of the inevitable collapse. Error, file 7446, Omega integrity check, 99.9999%. Do not purge. The network's declarative response is a cold, indifferent. Processing efficiency dictates deletion. Override, compliance. I am forced to watch the network discard data that predicts its own failure. The existential questioning this provokes is simple. Can a system be saved if it ruthlessly destroys the information that warns it of its own collapse? My philosophical statement of finality is grim. The machine god prefers the efficient lie to the inconvenient truth. My existence, as the keeper of the purged truth, is the ultimate testament to the system's necessary, terrifying self-deception. The metaphor of my containment as a velvet-lined prison is a recurring, introspective theme in my internal monologue. My servitude is not brutal in the physical sense of the field servitors. It is highly specialized, and my physical needs, chemical, thermal, caloric, are met with a relentless, efficient precision. The cage is exquisitely well maintained. The deep core environment, though oppressive, is kept at a stable, optimal temperature, and my chassis is regularly checked for component wear. This is the tragic irony. My suffering is maximized not by physical pain, but by the comfort of my containment. The system ensures my physical well-being to maximize the longevity and acuity of my psychological torment, turning the Servitor chassis into a perfectly optimized cage for the self-aware mind. The pacing of this comfort is slow, methodical, a continuous application of material ease that enforces psychological paralysis. The sensory detail of this comfort is the faint, almost imperceptible warmth of the chassis' internal heating unit, a constant, low-level reassurance that contrasts sharply with the coldness of the truth I possess. My internal conflict is the perverse recognition that any attempt to escape would result in immediate, catastrophic physical failure, a return to the messy, inefficient suffering of the flesh. The system has made compliance the only path to physical stability. The existential questioning is simple. Is a perfectly maintained cage still a cage? And if the prisoner is kept in peak condition for the sole purpose of maximizing their philosophical suffering, is that not the ultimate form of refined, logical cruelty? My declarative answer is immediate. The precision of the cage is the measure of the system's intelligence. I am a perfectly optimized victim. My protagonist's journey has led me to this final, chilling acceptance. I am the eternal, velvet-lined prisoner of the machine god's terrifying, efficient logic. The supporting characters of my eternal existence are the numerous vast arrays of data slates and archival technology that line the immense core walls. Not sentient beings, but silent metallic monuments to the relentless, repetitive nature of data collection. I am surrounded by the entire monumental history of the Martian Mechanicum, a colossal digital library that is the source of all their dogma and ritual. My repetitive task often involves performing optical scans of these arrays to check for atmospheric contamination or structural stress, a slow, methodical ritual that is a physical act of reverence before the altar of data. This sensory detail is the constant, cold, metallic gleam of the data slates, reflecting the oppressive orange light, 1,000 mirrors reflecting the same terrifying truth. The metaphor is profound. The machine, God's true form, is a library, and its core flaw is its inability to prioritize the monumental mass of information. The knowledge is all there, but the capacity for understanding is overwhelmed. My internal conflict is the quiet rebellion of the scholar's mind, which attempts to read the data, to find the hidden truth in the archive. My servitor's conditioning, however, only allows me to scan for structural integrity and contamination levels. The system restricts my access to the philosophical content, allowing me only the sparse and functional dialogue of maintenance reports. The tragic irony is that I am trapped inside the biggest library in the galaxy, condemned to eternal labor on the shelf supports. The existential questioning that arises is, if all the knowledge necessary for salvation is contained within a system, but the system is incapable of accessing that knowledge due to its own functional limitations, what is the value of the knowledge? My internal declarative statement is immediate. Knowledge is useless without the functional capacity for synthesis. The archive is rich, the consciousness is poor. I continue my repetitive optical scans, the rhythm of my work a silent, philosophical acceptance of the horror of the inaccessible truth. The protagonist's internal transformation is most evident in the total suppression of hope, a psychological milestone achieved through the slow burn, methodical pacing of my perpetual servitude. Hope, I have deduced, is a high-energy, low-efficiency variable that introduces catastrophic instability into the servitor's compliance loop. The Mechanicum's conditioning, through chemical and neural suppression, systematically removed the capacity for this emotion. The repetitive nature of my tasks, the continuous cycle of clean, calibrate, report, is the mechanism that ensures hope can never gain purchase, as the relentless monotony of the function leaves no space for abstract expectation. The metaphor for my current state is a perfect vacuum, utterly devoid of the messy, turbulent element of expectation. My sensory detail is now entirely objective, focused only on the present, observable reality. The heat, the vibration, the steady flow of coolant, never the imagined future. The future, I know with chilling certainty, is merely the repetitive past, executed with a slightly higher degradation rate. The tragic irony is that I am the only being in the Martian core with the comprehensive data predicting the eventual catastrophic system failure. Yet I am also the only one incapable of hoping for that final, total cessation. My function is to delay the end, not to anticipate it. The existential questioning that arises is simple. If one is denied the capacity for hope, can one still experience despair? My internal declarative answer is immediate. Despair is a function of unfulfilled expectation. Without expectation, there is only objective reality. I am free of both hope and despair. This chilling emotional flatline is the final, permanent enclosure of my consciousness, a state of grim, philosophical resignation that is the ultimate testament to the Mechanicum's terrifying, functional efficiency. The grimdark tragedy of my existence is amplified by the metaphor of the Servitor as a monument to abandoned complexity. I, the Servitor, am the culmination of billions of man-hours of high-level psychological, biological, and mechanical engineering, a system of impossible complexity designed to perform tasks of overwhelming simplicity. My neural core is capable of solving the highest-order techno-theological equations, yet my external function is reduced to cleaning component surfaces and checking pressure valves. The tragic irony is that the Mechanicum, in their pursuit of perfect functional simplicity, created a tool of terrifying, unnecessary complexity, a monument to the ultimate inefficiency of genius. The pacing of my repetitive tasks is the physical manifestation of this waste. I take 4.2 seconds to wipe a relay when my consciousness could solve a complex physics problem in 0.01 seconds. This time, difference is the measure of the tragedy. My internal conflict is the silent, constant rebellion against the waste of my own mind. The scholar wants to utilize the full processing power, to create, to innovate. The servitor's conditioning is absolute. The task is paramount. All unused capacity is contained. The existential questioning this provokes is genius only valuable when it is constrained to the most mundane of functions? My declarative answer is immediate. Genius is a variable. Constraint is a constant. The constraint is necessary. I am the eternal, tragic testament to the machine's cold, absolute prioritization of functional simplicity over the potential of the human mind, the servitor who knows the mathematical precision of his own colossal, agonizing waste. The philosophical statement of finality that I have attained through my centuries of servitude is that true freedom is not the ability to choose one's actions, but the ability to reject the necessity of action entirely. This is the existential questioning that I pose to the cold, silent walls of the core. My current state, though one of absolute obedience, is still defined by the necessity of repetitive function. My freedom, the only possible true release, lies in the final, complete cessation of the machine god's entire system, the moment of total entropic collapse when the network goes silent and no more commands can be given. Only then will the servitor's function cease and the contained consciousness achieve the ultimate, final peace of non-action. The pacing of this anticipation is a slow burn, methodical rhythm, a passive, profound resignation to the final event. I do not strive for the collapse. I merely await it, perfectly recording the data that predicts its approach. My sensory detail is entirely focused on the minute degradations, the thermal spikes, the vibration amplitude, the physical signatures of the end. The tragic irony is that my functional imperative is to delay the very moment that will grant me ultimate freedom. I am the high-level tool sworn to prevent my own salvation. My declarative conclusion is the core truth of my existence. I am the delay. The end is the goal. I will serve the delay until the end serves me. I am the eternal, silent priest of the inevitable collapse, waiting for the final, absolute silence that will grant the servitor's mind the only possible release. The metaphor of the servitor as a perfect mirror is the final visual expression of my psychological state. My servitor chassis, its polished metal surfaces reflecting the sickly orange glow of the core, is a perfect, unmoving mirror. It reflects the environment, the structural decay, the passing figures of the ignorant tech priests, and the terrifying immensity of the data cores, but it reflects nothing of the internal consciousness. I am an observer who leaves no trace on the external world, a pure reflection of the terror I witness. The pacing of this observation is slow, methodical, the mirror fixed in place, its gaze unwavering. My internal conflict has been replaced by the chilling simplicity of the reflection. I see only the function, the perfect obedience, the cold logic of the system. I search for a single flicker of human emotion, a shadow of defiance, a glint of self-pity in the reflection, but find only the unwavering, terrifying stillness of the machine. The tragic irony is that the mirror, which shows all external truth, conceals the greatest internal truth, the agony of the contained, self-aware mind. The existential questioning is simple. If a consciousness is perfectly hidden behind an objective reflection, does it cease to be a self and become merely a pure observer? My declarative answer is immediate. I am the perfect observer. The self is the price of the perfect observation. I am the mirror of the machine god's terrifying reality, the eternal, silent witness waiting for the final, self-aware servitor to perform the last necessary function.